Target has joined Budweiser in the anti-woke panic. The retail company released a whole new line of clothes to push transsexualism, which included, for example, women's swimsuits with tuck-friendly features so that men can hide their genitalia. And also among the collection were clothes with graphic designs from London-based designer Abprallen, which critics also discovered was promoting Satanism, alongside with transsexualism. Now, after the backlash, Target began removing some of these items from its shop. In a public statement today, in fact, the company said the line was in anticipation of Pride Month, which begins next week. It noted that it has offered homosexual-themed items to celebrate this for more than a decade. But it added this, quote, "Since introducing this year's collection, we've experienced threats impacting our team members' sense of safety and well-being while at work." Target notes that given these circumstances, the company is, quote, "making adjustments to our plans, including removing items that have been at the center of the most significant confrontational behavior." It adds, however, the company remains committed to the Pride movement and stands with them not only for Pride Month, but throughout the entire year. So they're not apologizing to customers. What's really going on? Well, what's really going on is that Target is facing public criticism for promoting a designer with satanic ties openly with their clothing line, and for other items it was featuring. There was a real public backlash. The company's stock, they dropped more than 12% over the last month alone. It appeared that Target was quickly heading the way of Budweiser, which lost more than 26% in sales compared to this time last year after its now infamous promotion with trans activist Dylan Mulvaney. And folks, people are joining the boycott together on this. First with Budweiser, now with Target. Conservative influencers taken up the issue. Benny Johnson, for example, Turning Point USA. He raised the point that really it's mostly men carrying out the boycott of Budweiser. But with Target, it looks like it's women doing it. He posted a photo of a Target shopping bag on Twitter, and he wrote this. He said, "Men did our part with Bud Light. We made it socially unacceptable in man culture to drink woke beer. The Target battle will only be won with strong moms standing up for their kids. Target hired a Satanist to groom your kids into a sex cult. Will moms be ashamed to hold this bag?" Matt Walsh, a show host at Daily Wire, he emphasized the importance of these boycotts, at least for conservatives. He wrote this on Twitter. He said, quote, "The goal is to make Pride toxic for brands. If they decide to shove this garbage in our face, they should know that they'll pay a price. It won't be worth whatever they think they'll gain. First Bud Light and now Target. Our campaign is making progress. Let's keep going." But look, Target and Budweiser aren't just taking heat from people on the right. It's actually not just conservatives. People on the left are criticizing the companies as well, but they're criticizing them for folding to the pressure. California Governor Gavin Newsom, for example, he criticized Target in a post on Twitter. He wrote this. He said, "CEO of Target, Brian Cornell, selling out the LGBT plus community to extremists is a real profile in courage." Now, Newsom claimed that the boycotts are not just against a couple stores in the South, and he seems to be making a swipe here against stereotypes against the southern U.S. states as, being more religious. But he wrote that rather, there was a systematic attack on the gay community happening across the country. And the California governor then tied the argument to race somehow, which, he said this as well. He said, "Wake up, America. This doesn't stop here. You're black, you're Asian, you're Jewish, you're a woman. You're next." Now look, the boycotts have nothing to do with discrimination of race. There's been nothing on this. Or, to real women, for example. More likely, though, Newsom is alleging that the boycotts represent a broader pushback on the socialist agenda behind, race and gender politics. This is what they refer to as DEI. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the political program behind these types of things. It does appear that other pillars in that movement are crumbling. So really, let me show you this. News hit today, for example. The political movement Black Lives Matter, they're heading for insolvency. The value of its nonprofit foundation, they dropped by $10 million. Its fundraising is down 88%. It's now looking at an $8.5 million deficit. There's also some controversy just sprinkled in with it all, given that as Daily Mail notes, the organization still somehow managed to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for services to a board member and to relatives of its founder. Back to the corporate boycotts. As Newsom pointed out, this campaign of public backlash on transsexual movements and the products overall is happening right before Pride Month. It's that time of year when the government pushes the homosexual agenda. Companies change their corporate logos on Twitter to feature rainbows. Unless they're, the corporate branches in Middle Eastern countries, they don't do it there. And also when the great virtue signaling is over, well, the participating business entities, they win brownie points with financial firms for adhering to the DEI investment standards. But this year could be different. There's now a stigma around all of this. Businesses are really facing some real pushback. People are boycotting transgender clothing lines that, have satanic ties, for example. And if it means backing a company that goes against their values, guess what? Conservatives won't even take free beer. They won't do it. The annual corporate political campaign could very well be a death sentence for brands that participate if they join this year. Behind the scenes, the companies have gotten an artificial boost, though. DEI investment firms can pour money into companies if they face, backlash, like, for example, people boycotting the goods if they push these homosexual agendas. And typically, really, what happens is these companies just wait out the typical short memory of public outrage. But I'll tell you right now, this time it could be different. These boycotts, the reason for this, the boycotts are not just about bad politics. They're about culture and about the perception that the trans movement is harming children. Investment firms that try to artificially prop up these companies using other people's money are now going to be hedging their bets that customers are going to actually come back, and they might not. It's possible that people will not come back to these brands because, again, these are not your average boycotts. A lot of these trans programs are very much targeted at children. And this is one of the big points of tension, really, against this whole woke establishment right now and the actions you see around it. People no longer just see this. They no longer look at the old claim with the LGBT community. The claim they just want to be able to, freely love each other. That was the old narrative. Instead, people now equate the movement with government power. It's about forcing people not to just tolerate their values, right? Tolerance is when you don't get angry at someone, you don't hate someone. It's a step beyond that when they try to force you to accept them morally, to adopt their moral values. And that's the way it has changed. Now look, there are two main ways of trying to embed this, forced acceptance into society. On one side, they're targeting children. On the other side, they're criticizing and trying to tear down traditional religious values. With the attacks on children, let's go over this first. People usually think the programs like, drag queen shows and that kind of thing when they think of the targeting of kids. Many of these are really hypersexual, very aggressively sexual, and they include exposing children to sexual imagery, which, usually that's a crime. This was one of the big conflicts the LGBT community had with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, for example. Now look, back when DeSantis banned school lessons that teach sexual orientation and trans ideology to kids, the establishment framed it as DeSantis saying that people can't say gay. It is the, don't say gay law, they called it. When DeSantis pushed for the death sentence if an adult rapes a child, the establishment criticized him, defending pedophilia. Now look, in April, the Pride Alliance at Treasure Coast, they even canceled the gay pride parade in Florida because they claimed that holding the parade would be a risk to them. And why would it be a risk? It's because Florida has made it illegal for a business to admit children to sexual performances by adults. And look, apparently not being able to hold a sexual display in front of kids is now viewed as a threat to the very heart of this whole movement. Think about that. The New Republic declared, in fact, that the ban on this in Florida, they said they're so extreme, it could ban all pride parades. Now look, maybe I'm old-fashioned here, but if something cannot hold a public display without conducting lewd acts in front of children, maybe there's something else that should be changed here. It's not just in Florida either. Other states are making it illegal to perform sexual acts or sexual performances in front of kids. A bill in Tennessee, for example, what it does, it restricts adult cabaret performances from being held in public or in the presence of children. It also limits them from being held within 1,000 feet of a place of worship, in public parks, or in schools. News outlets like NPR, they're criticizing this as rolling back the laws on public acceptance of homosexuality. But in reality, look, when was it ever legal to perform sexually in front of children? How is it even controversial to ban sexual displays to children? But then there's the attempt to tear down as well traditional religious values. And this is where Target's trans ban really ran afoul. You know, the whole Satanist thing. Take, for example, other things taking place. What's happening in Los Angeles? The Dodgers, the baseball team, they invited a drag troupe called Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence to their annual Pride Night celebration. And they're facing flack from the public, not just because of the whole trans agenda, but because the group of performers is accused of blaspheming Christianity as part of their performances, such as, for example, with lewd acts being performed on a man placed on a cross to have him look like Jesus. Critics online, they're calling the organization an anti-Christian hate group. And of course, there are also, the reality as well. Many companies are pushing woke agendas. There's a lot of them. It's not just these few companies. Some people are questioning, really, whether it makes any sense to be just selectively boycotting a couple of them instead of saying, hey, it's just how it is. Or saying on the other side, maybe boycott every one of them. But from a strategic level, guess what? It looks like conservatives are adopting a tool from the left. You don't need to go after everyone to have an impact. It's a strategy from radical leftist Saul Alinsky. He wrote in his book, Rules for Radicals, for example, to quote, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Cut off the support networks, and isolate the target from sympathy. And using that strategy often employed by the left, well, look, it's possible these boycotts may actually work.